My name is Rick Winnicky. I'm a sculptor. I live in Israel. Most of all the years of sculpting has happened in Israel, but now where the interview is being taken now is I'm in Poland. And for me, it's not like I'm in Poland. I'm more in Brzezinka, but even more than that, I'm in Birkenau. Where we're standing right now is about 300 or 400 meters from the gates of Birkenau, Auschwitz. And for me, the whole sense of being within this place becomes a dialogue. The fact that me as an Israeli, but also Canadian, is standing in this place geographically as a sculptor who has produced a piece of work that's called the Fountain of Tears. The Fountain of Tears, just the terminology, just the words, the Fountain of Tears, has been taken from a verse in Jeremiah where it talks about the prophet crying out. And he's saying, "Oh Lord, that my head would be a fountain of tears, or that my head would be a spring of water, and my eyes a fountain of tears, that I would weep day and night for the loss of my people." That was like a key door for us in the beginning of the process of creating the fountain. The fountain in itself is, I'm a sculptor. This is a large wall, about 20 meters long. It has 10 life-size bronze figures within it. It's a dialogue in a sense. If we had to say it in a single question or a single sentence, say, we would call the Fountain of Tears a dialogue of suffering between the crucifixion of Jesus and the Holocaust. And in a way, the fountain is divided into 7 crucifixion scenes that then just basically each one of the scenes represents one of the 7 last words that Jesus speaks while he's dying. The deepest place of suffering for Jesus himself, in a way, is speaking to the deepest place of suffering within Jewish history, within collective Jewish memory. These words are being spoken to a single individual that in a way represents a Holocaust survivor, but he's wearing the memory of the camp himself. Because everything you're dealing with as a sculptor, you're trying to communicate visually. And you're trying to create some kind of a communication that touches the Holocaust. And what you have generally are 3 visual marks on anyone that went through the camps. Would be a shaved head, both male and female. Within the first hours of getting to the camps, their heads were shaved. The next thing was everything they possessed was taken away from them, and they were stripped naked and forced to stand for hours until the clothes that belonged to them, and in a sense the clothes that they identified with themselves and the clothes that identified them within the normal world that they had been in. Within the world of Auschwitz, they were given striped clothes that then marked them as prisoners. But the final thing that happened within the process of a prisoner going into that world, the thing that is the most personal to us as a human being, was taken from them. Their name. Every one of us has a family name and an individual private name. The family name gives us a historical line of reference. Our personal name marks us on that historical line. But within the camps, the person walks into that world, and the thing that's taken from them, which was crucial for me in the sculpting part of the figures, was they were no longer a name anymore, they were a number. I know Holocaust survivors that told me the story of the liberation of their camp, that they couldn't remember their own name when they were asked, but they could immediately remember the number. their prisoner number. Because in the world of Auschwitz, if you did not respond immediately to your number called, it was a death sentence. So the fountain is a dialogue of an individual who's wearing, the survivor that's wearing the clothes of memory, the striped clothes, the shaved heads, and there's a reference within the fountain really strongly of a tattooed number. You take those elements and in a sense, you put the figure in a position of response to the words that are spoken from the crucifixion. The 7 last words that Jesus speaks while he's dying, for me, are one of the most important communications ever. And in a sense, it's his suffering, in a sense, giving dialogue or giving a position of dialogue to the deepest place of suffering within the Jewish people. Both individuals, it's not a dialogue of religion, it's a dialogue of relationship. So what I want to do now is take you through the journey that's within this building. Again, where we are 500 meters from the gates of Birkenau, the prisoners within Auschwitz-Birkenau referred to those gates as the gates of hell for good reason. The dirt road that we have in front of the property itself was a road that was created by the Nazis, that they would do selection of Jews that were brought in by train from roughly 27 different European countries. They went through selection. It's called the Judenrampe. There's a memorial with a train car there. And then if they were chosen for immediate death, then they were walked up this dirt road through the gates into Birkenau and then killed there. Auschwitz I is about a kilometer walk from here. And in a sense, if they were selected to live, going to Auschwitz I was, in a sense, it was also a sentence of death to the majority of the prisoners that went there, but in a way it was a much slower death. But a lot of them that couldn't keep up with what was happening in that camp was then taken to Auschwitz-Birkenau to the gas chambers. But the process of touching the Holocaust and putting it together, in a sense, in a dialogue with the crucifixion, a lot of really close friends of mine in Israel, they have described it as being insane. It's almost, for a Jewish person, the crucifixion is such a negative symbol within their collective memory, because it was always the church that persecuted them for all the history, all through European history. And in a sense, the Holocaust comes to an ultimate expression where an average Jew would look at Germany as the beginning of Protestant Christianity. The heart of Protestant Christianity, where the Reformation was, the head of Reformation, Martin Luther, this was a geographical German thing. But out of Germany then creates the deepest place of suffering for the Jewish people within the Holocaust. So the idea in most Jewish people's ways of thinking, the crucifixion of Jesus is a very negative symbol, very negative. And the idea of putting it together with the symbolism, the visual symbolism that they have collectively in their memory, together for them, a lot of times we've had a lot of Israelis say, this is totally insane what you've done. You've taken the two hardest things in our history and you've put them at the same table. But in most cases in Israel, with the Fountain of Tears in Israel, because there's the original Fountain of Tears is there, this is now in a sense, the second part of the communication here in Birkenau. But here within this building, what we have, before a person coming in here sees the fountain of tears, what we do is we walk them through what we call the hallway of questions. And now we'll do that walk. So we step out of the foyer within the building, out of a place of a lot of light, into a hallway that doesn't have very much light in it. I wanted this to be called the hallway of questions because in a way you're trying to introduce the person that's coming to see the fountain of tears to a portion of the struggle that I myself went through, and in a way agreeing with God in order to do this. Everything for me is felt on the inside, the communications, and in a way as a sculptor you're trying to take this from the outside, from the inside, and make it something substantial out. So what we're looking at in a way are going to be 7 panels as we go up the hallway. Each one of the 7 panels represents what I would say 7 major questions in the struggle to respond in order to go into this creative process. What you're looking at is you're looking at the sky and you're looking at a mountain range, say, and then a plain. But in each one of the panels, what you have is a very distinct, strong line that divides it. And from this point on, basically you're looking underground. What you're seeing is a small hole here within the panel that represents a single seed. The seed is there, it's dormant, it's quiet, and it's hidden. The question that is connected in Hebrew is Eichan matchila tefillah. Where does prayer begin? Where is the beginning of every creative process? We come now to the second panel. The second question, התפילה מקבלת ביטוי ברגע שנופלת הדמעה. Does the prayer, does this thing that's buried inside and hidden, all of a sudden come to life somehow? Something touches it. So what you're looking at is the seed beginning to move in response to a line that's coming down with a single tear attached to it. Is this the beginning of a response? Is it a beginning of something being given expression? We come to the third panel that represents the next question. Within this panel, incorporated into the Hebrew that's within each one of the panels, there's an English word called payback. The word payback for me was a word that I kept feeling from the Lord. There was some kind of communication that was happening primarily in the year 2001. And what was connected to the word payback was, in a sense, the response of God to the Holocaust. Tagamul lashiv 6 מיליון מהשואה, האם זה אלוהים? זו תפילתו, האם אלו דמעותיו? The idea of tagmul within Hebrew is the sense of, if you've done something to me, now I do back to you. Almost like a sense of vengeance. There's a sense of, on the word, almost like a violent response. But in the Hebrew word tagmul, it's also a sense of restoration. Within the root of that word, it's like someone who has been addicted to drugs and goes through a program, and somehow who he was as a human being before the drugs is now restored back to him. But I'm looking at it, in a sense, examining this word, not understanding, but the Lord keeps saying to me, Lashiv 6 million, the sense of, I'm going to touch the number 6 million, And I'm going to take the number that for the Jewish people represents a number representing death. But what I'm feeling, in a sense, is the Lord is going to do payback. He's going to do, in a sense, vengeance, and a number that represents death, he's going to turn it into a number that represents life. All of these things were happening within this time of trying to examine, what does this mean? Is this really the Lord? How do I respond? But I realized that the key word within this payback word was touching the Holocaust. That there was an intention within the heart of God to touch this place that was so destructive. We come now to the fourth panel, the fourth question. And in a sense, what's going on is this is a description of my own personal struggle in trying to touch something that I don't understand, but I'm getting words within this journey that is bringing me to a place where I still don't understand very much, but there's another step where the seed has been awoken, and in a way with the emotions of tears, comes to the point of the prophetic word of payback that then introduces the word, the Holocaust, and 6 million, and in a sense, the intention of God to be able to take something so deadly and turn it into something that represents life. I'm hearing the communication, still not understanding very much, but the one response for me was, if this is touching the Holocaust, I can't do this. I can't touch this. Within this question, HaShoah lo, ech efasel mitoch choshech v'sheilot. The Holocaust for me has always been a central place in who I am living in Israel, who I am as an artist now, especially the last 10 years. But I look at it and I think the Holocaust always represented for me a place filled with darkness and questions. And within this question is, Lord, if this is the Holocaust, I can't do this. How do I sculpt if the only tools are darkness and questions? That's all I see with this. How do I even begin to touch this? But the thing that interests me within the process of struggle and how we respond to the Lord is the place of the seed. The seed still is progressing, still hidden, unseen, but now it's taking on a root. It's starting to press upward. There's still something going on within us relationally that's not seen. Even when we're saying no, this is still proceeding ahead. We come now to the fifth panel. The fifth panel for me was a major turning point, because everything that I'm talking about with these questions all happened in a single year. This was in the year 2001. You're dealing with the emotions of tears suddenly, and then all of a sudden you're getting this word about payback and touching the Holocaust. I'm struggling with the sense of Holocaust. How do I respond as an artist? How do I respond as a sculptor? My entire life with the Lord has always been built on response. Response to communication. I've always believed that He has the ability to communicate. I always know that if there's a problem in the communication, the problem is me. It's not Him. But it's me trying to get my head around these things and asking if I can respond. The seed now is progressing. It has 2 roots coming off of it. It's pressing upward, but it's broken the main barrier, the line. It comes out of a place of hiddenness and now it's being seen. And in a way, for a plant, that's the most vulnerable period of the life of a plant. Now it has to deal with other elements that it wasn't dealing with in the ground. But the turning point for me in 2001, I'm struggling with the concept of listening to the Holocaust. How do I respond? But in the middle of it, I'm introduced to a poem that's called The 7 Last Words. And I'm listening to a poem that's being recited by the actual poet himself. And it's a whole sense of the 7 last words of Jesus, but it's John's response to what his Lord and his best friend is saying while he's dying on the cross. And it's like, I don't really understand poetry that much, and it is a bit of a struggle for me. But within this poem, there was so much of a connectedness of John as the only disciple out of the 12 that stayed with Jesus during the crucifixion and heard these words. I'm listening in a way, these are like a different way of hearing these 7 words. So I'm drawn, I'm intrigued. And I start to do sketches, and I'm doing drawings, and in a way, I'm responding to what I was feeling when I was hearing this poem. But within that moment, all of a sudden, there's a lot of really strange things happening, that somehow these things are overlapping, touching the suffering of the Holocaust. And I'm like, no, you can't. I'm focused on Jesus and his crucifixion. I'm not focusing on this payback word and all of these other things, and I'm trying to push it away. But I kept feeling it's being pushed together. And this is really bothering me. So the question within this panel, Shoat ha'am Yehudi, the Holocaust of the Jewish people, Tzlivat Yeshua? No, ve'od pam lo. You cannot put living in Israel, understanding the huge misunderstanding of who the person of Jesus is in the mind and in the memory of the Jewish people. It's so negative, and especially his crucifixion. The idea of doing a piece of art that would have both these personalities together was insane, like totally insane. So I'm resisting, I'm pushing back, and I'm going, how in the world do you connect these two? How can their cries be intermingled with his cries? Is there a place of common suffering between the two? And in a way, I'm pushing it away, but at the same time, I'm asking questions. Because I always know I'm the problem in the communication. My life is built on response to what I'm feeling the Lord communicating on the inside. We come now to the 6th panel. All the way through this process, within this hallway, I'm being introduced to different things, and different points of the struggle keep getting added to the struggle itself. But again, the seed now has 2 very defined roots. It's pressed through the ground, is broken, and becomes a stalk of wheat. But it's very young. It's just coming to the point of where it's standing now. But the question within the 6th panel, Ha'im yesh zicharon havui b'tocham, is there memory somehow hidden in these 2 parts? And I'm looking at the sense where, on one hand, I don't want to touch this at all. I'm really struggling, but in a way I'm still asking questions. For the Jewish people, everything to do with the Holocaust is all connected to memory. Everything. And in a sense, memory is always something that they will say we have to remember in order to somehow bring life to those that perished, and so that this won't happen again. There's all kinds of initiation attached to the word memory, but also within the person of Jesus. The supper, the last time he eats together with his followers, he's taking the bread and he's saying, "This is my body broken for you. When you eat of this, remember me. When you drink the wine, remember my blood that was poured out for you." And in a sense, he's commanding them to remember. And with the Jewish people, from a biblical point of view, all the holidays are built on points of memory within their relationship with God. Remember when I brought you out of Egypt. Remember when I sojourned with you within the desert. All of this connected to memory. So now I'm touching this word. The final part of the question is, if there's something connected to the two of them, Ech ani imsa oto, how will I find it? We come to the seventh panel. The seventh panel is the final question, in a sense. There were hundreds of questions, but I decided within this hallway to focus on 7 primary questions that I struggled with, but this one was the biggest out of all of them. B'tochi ein zecher, ba'avari ein kesher. Within my personal past, I have no connection. I look at it and I think, איך אפסל מצבת זיכרון ללא שום זכר? How in the world do I, as a sculptor, create a memorial to the Holocaust if I don't have memory? How do you do it? How do you step into the process? The whole year was filled with certain words, trigger words, and things that I'm trying to understand, and in a way hoping, in a sense, that this will go away and I don't have to respond. But within this final question, again, the seed is fully broken down now into roots, it's pressed forward. The stalk of wheat is getting to a higher level, say, of maturity. But it's the point, the main point of struggle came within this argument. How do I create a memorial with no memory? I'm not Jewish. I haven't had anyone in my family go through the Holocaust. And in a sense, in my own personal history, I have no beginning position. I don't have a place to begin. And I looked at it and I thought, even being born in Canada, from a geographical point of view, if I was a non-Jew that was born in France or in Holland, somewhere within Europe, I would have national memory touching the Holocaust. Somehow I would have something within my national connectedness, my family, somewhere something to the Holocaust. But I don't have either of these things. I've got nothing. And in a way, I'm presenting this to the Lord in this prayer, in this argument. And for a moment in this whole year of struggle, I feel almost like I'm happy for a minute or two, where I'm thinking to myself, I can't possibly respond. I have nothing. There isn't an open doorway. I can easily walk away from this and feel justified somehow. But within that moment, I felt like the Lord said to me 3 words really strongly. I felt like the Lord said to me, but I do. We now get to the final panel. The final panel is not a question, it's a response. Because all the way through this is the struggle, the sense of tears, the sense of payback, the sense of the pain of Jesus somehow blended with the pain of the Jewish people in the Holocaust. all of these things have an effect on this one seed buried and alone in the beginning. And now it comes down to the final question. Again, how do you create a memorial with no memory? And all of a sudden, I feel this thing on me really strong of the Lord saying, but I do. I have a memory of it all. I have a memory of every child, every man, every woman, every pit, every train car, every gas chamber, every prayer, every cry, every tear. I have a memory of it all. You create from my memory, not from yours. And for me personally, within that moment of hearing this, all my argument came to an end. Everything had to be stopped. And I realized that I have to step into a place that I really don't know where this is going to lead. I already have a sense of fear of stepping into the dark, but at the same time, I'm intrigued relationally because I know this is the Lord. I know this is His communication. I realize my weakness and the sense of wanting to respond and naturally being afraid of the dark, in a sense, stepping into the dark. But everything within this panel is, in a way, what we've learned after. Is now the wheat stalk is fully grown. And in a sense, all the seeds within the mature wheat stalk have all been blown in the wind. The panel is the longest. It's twice the size of all the other ones because the response and the effect of what we've seen over the years now with different people coming to see the Fountain of Tears, different people trying to touch this somehow, or didn't know where they were going, they were a part of a group, and all of a sudden they end up in the Negev desert in Israel in front of an artist trying to explain this wall, that they're all in a little bit of shock and seeing. But for me, the fountain's a prayer. It's an intercession. It's something that's birthed out of the heart of the Father. I believe totally that these are His tears. These are His emotions attached to this. And now, in this final response, it's also His memory. Because the Lord is the only one that has the capacity to be able to carry this level of suffering and to know where every tear belongs. The voice of every child, the voice of every human being that cries out towards Him within His suffering. He's the only one that has the ability to absorb it, to be able to carry it. So all these seeds that are blown in the wind, it's a hope within this prayer that there are other people that have seen the fountain, somehow connected to it heart-wise, and in a way belong to this prayer of the Lord wanting to restore this number of death into a number that represents life. We step out of the hallway of questions, and in a sense, out of a place that is mostly dark, into a place that has just a little bit more light to it. But we're introduced to what I would say is the first piece, touching the Fountain of Tears. The sense of the first personality, which is Jesus struggling in Gethsemane with the cup of sorrows. If you look at the piece itself, the figure is holding the cup far away from him, but the cup is filled to the brim. And in a sense, I looked at this with all my struggling over responding to what I felt like the Lord was saying to me, came down to a point that I always tell people I'm an artist, I'm not a theologian, but for the sense of what I understood from the New Testament, Gethsemane is the only place that Jesus himself struggles with the will of the Father. And in a way is asking the Father to take this cup away from him that he won't have to drink. But it's within that struggle in Gethsemane that the crucifixion begins. Because he has to know exactly what is before him and all the sorrow that he's going to have to drink from within this cup. But in relationship to the Jewish people, the sense of what we had talked about, the primary position of memory, the place of memory for the Jewish people, it's always marked by stones. If you go to a Jewish graveyard, people will leave small stones on the headstones. If you go within the camp, within Birkenau, you'll see the train car, and on the ladder going up on the train car, there'll be lots of small stones. So within Jewish culture, stones are a marker of memory. So I wanted, in the very beginning of beginning to see the fountain of tears, the whole sense of Gethsemane, Jesus within his struggle, he's incorporated into these pile of stones, which is, again, almost like a sense of collective Jewish memory. He's connected to all their points of memory. But for him, Gethsemane is the moment before the crucifixion. What you're seeing on the wall as a background around the Gethsemane is historic photography of the ghettos. The ghettos within the world of the Holocaust was the moment for the Jewish people, the moment before Birkenau, Auschwitz, before the killing camps. And so in a way, the main question, is there something in common with his suffering and their suffering, in a way begins within his moment before the crucifixion, their moment before the killing camps. When we step away from Gethsemane, and we step into the larger room that has the fountain of tears in it, the first thing you see when you're looking at it in a general sense is you've got 7 crucifixion panels. But between each one of the panels, it's like a divider using field stones. There are 6 dividers that represent a memorial to the 6 million that perished. And so in a sense, they become the aspect of binding it all together. I wanted the sense of the crucifixion being seen as a whole, but divided into 7 parts. The first panel that we look at is, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they do. And in a sense, each one of the words, when Jesus speaks out this word of forgiveness, the figure that represents the Holocaust is like what I described in the beginning. It's a single figure. Each one of them are in bronze. Each one of them are wearing the striped clothes. Each one of the figures has his head shaved. So as much visual as possible to the figure himself, he represents the Holocaust as a single person. Now, when Jesus speaks out the word, I looked at it and I thought to myself, what would be the first word that Jesus would speak out? And it would be something that touches the place of forgiveness. Father, forgive them, they don't know what they do. The figure within the Holocaust, it's a declaration. His hands obviously are spread open because of the crucifixion, but his hands are wide open. This is a forgiveness that's given out to everyone that has ears to hear. But the idea of the forgiveness, it's like a covenant that's created within these words, that the whole aspect and the foundation of it is forgiveness itself. The figure that represents the Holocaust, like all the survivors that I've met, over the years, they struggle with the word forgiveness because they always attach the word forgiveness to a forgetting. And in a way, they can't forget. And in a sense, it's somehow trying to get them to understand that you can forgive and still remember. But for them, it's a sense where now the figure representing the Holocaust is leaning into the pillar representing those that perished. And in a way, he's struggling. He's clutching his chest. Because if I receive forgiveness to myself, the covenant demands that I give it out. I have to give out forgiveness. And so in a way, he's leaning into the stones and struggling. All the way through the panels, what we have are also water that slowly goes over the surface of each one of the pillars. That also, like what I reminded or what I spoke about in the beginning with Jeremiah, in the sense of this being a fountain of tears. The tears represent the sense of that prophetic cry of remembering. The second panel is today you'll be with me in paradise. The crucifixion is stretching to the right, trying to touch the stones that represent those that perished. The other hand in the crucifixion is turned, the fingers are turned down because of historically the two thieves that were crucified with Jesus. One thief within the dialogue between Jesus and these thieves, the one thief is saying to him, asking, begging, that Jesus, when you come into your kingdom, remember me. Again, the sense of remembrance, of memory. But what the Lord says to this thief is, today you'll be with me in paradise. He creates this promise to the other thief. In a sense, the other thief is mocking him, cursing him. And so the hand of the crucifixion is turned down, almost a sense of disappointment, another rejection in a way. The figure that represents the Holocaust has his hands going in two different directions. Because in a way, speaking of a friend who was a Holocaust survivor that survived over a year, which was unbelievable, in Auschwitz, she told us that on a given day in Auschwitz, we would curse God. Curse God for allowing somehow for us to be within this hell of this camp. But she would say to me on other days, as a group within this, they would cry out to God and ask him to remember them. And in a sense, it's the identification of the Holocaust to the response of these two thieves. The third panel is, mother, this is your son. Son, this is your mother. This, in a way, the hands are together. In a way, he's saying to John, his only disciple, take Mary, carry her, be her support. The figure representing the Holocaust is carrying a very heavy cloth over his shoulders. Within the folds of the cloth is a very interwoven, surrealistic figure of a woman, completely emaciated, but he carries her within this cloth. All the survivors that I've met over the year always carry the memory of those that perished with them. It's like a weight that's put on them. The same sense, but it's an unnatural relationship that's created out of his place of suffering. And in the same way, Jesus creates John as being now Mary's son in order to carry her within these words. And again, it's a relationship created out of a desperate situation, but is completely unnatural. The center panel, for me, within the process of creating, was the hardest. It was the most emotional out of all the panels. Every panel has its memory attached to it, for sure. But the center panel is, my God, why have you forsaken me? And you look at it, and in a sense, the figure representing Jesus crucified, everything within the movement of this panel is being cried upward. It's the Son crying out to the Father within this place of desperation, and in a way searching for the Father. The figure that represents the Holocaust is like so many survivors, again, that we've known over the years. If you even bring God up in the conversation, their response almost every single time was, where was he? Where was he when we cried out? Why did he not come? Why did he not respond? Where was he? And in a way, it becomes more of an accusation than it is a genuine question. The figure representing the Holocaust is the only one that has his back turned to the crucifixion, because the sense of abandonment is a position of being completely alone and lost within that loneliness. And so it's like he's throwing himself through time with this word. It's the same word that survivors they carry with them everywhere they go. Where was God? Where was he when we cried out? So all of this interaction within these words, within the expression back to the words from the crucifixion, there's such a place of identity within this center panel. The figure representing Jesus has his head shaved and his arm is numbered. Just like what I spoke about in the beginning, the idea of the final taking of the identity. Jesus is identified to such a degree within this panel, it's like both of them are interwoven in these words. Because when I was working on this panel in particular, I read a book that was written by a Sonderkommando. The job of a Sonderkommando within Auschwitz-Birkenau was the one to close the doors to the gas chambers. And what was written in the memorial and the memories of what he'd recorded in this book was that the gassing process took 20 minutes. The gassing process took 20 minutes in order to kill within the chambers in Birkenau over 2,500 people. And in a way, he said within this book that he'll never get the cries out of his mind. He always hears these voices. Because he would say for the first 10 minutes of the gas being put in, the Zyklon B putting into the gas chamber, that all of a sudden every kind of cry, every kind of prayer was going up because they knew they were all about to die. And he said it took about 10 minutes until the gas silenced all the voices. But in his mind, the voices were never silenced. But he kept repeating in the book, one of the things that he heard over and over again from within the chambers was the verses, a few verses out of Psalm 22, which is, my God, why have you forsaken me? When I read this book and I saw the connectedness of the words of Jesus to the exact last words of those within the chambers, this totally shook me. And in a way, the number and the shaved head on the crucified Jesus had to be a full identification with their suffering, a full identification with their loss of identity. The next panel to it is the word, I thirst. Within the crucifixion, Jesus has always proclaimed himself to be living water and the source of living water. And if you come and drink from me, you won't be thirsty anymore. Looking at those verses and looking at the word that he speaks out, I thirst, it means that there's nothing left in him. Every drop has been given out. Everything that he can be has been poured out. The fingers are surreal. They're all going down. The body is all being pulled down. And the feet nailed in the crucifixion is like a single drop that's left. The figure that represents the Holocaust in its response to the word I thirst comes from a historical point of view where many of the survivors, even before they got to Birkenau, they had died of thirst within the cattle cars. It's recorded historically that sometimes these transports within these cattle cars could take up to 2 weeks. In the summertime, no water, no sanitation, nothing. People were passing out, even dying within the cattle cars. So the figure representing the Holocaust, one hand is up, almost touching the feet that represent the last drop or the last tear. The other hand is down, touching the ground. And in a way representing there's a thirst that kills you emotionally, where you're dry on the inside, but there's also the physical thirst that kills you from a lack of water. So both of these represent that. The next panel out of the 7 is, it is finished. It's been brought to an end. The declaration in the crucifixion, the figure is very strong within the face. It's a declaration bringing death to an end. The hands are covering the heads of the nails. I wanted the sense that Jesus has now covered the heads of the nails. He's now brought this to an end, this effect. The figure that represents the Holocaust, again, standing up, but both hands going in different directions. This one for me is the sense of a complete loss of history. Everything that the Jewish people had known within Europe, within the whole course of the Holocaust, has now been lost. And so the figure is covering his face. So in a way you can't see him. His identity isn't easily seen anymore. The other hand is hovering in the air, almost looking for direction, almost wanting to point in a certain direction, but there was no direction. Between 1945 and 1948, I know survivors that lived those 3 years back inside the same camps, the same killing camps, now as refugees. They had no homes to go back to, no family that they belonged to anymore, and no one on the earth wanted them. The only place on the earth that wanted Jews during 1945 to 1948 was Israel, Palestine, pre-Israel. But the British Empire was blocking everything. They didn't want the Jews to go back. They wanted that land to go to the Arabs. It was all a lot of political pressure and maneuvering for sure. But it ended. Everything ended for the Jewish people of who they were outside of the land. The final panel is, into your hands I commend my spirit. The figure representing the crucified, the crucifixion is completely drained of everything. There's nothing left. He's like skin and bones. We've had Holocaust survivors come to us when they see the fountain and they say, this was us in the camps. This was us. There was nothing. It was just skin. It was stretched over bones. It totally represents us. And in a way, what is he saying to the Father? The final prayer from the crucifixion is that the Father, into your hands I now give my spirit. The figure that represents the Holocaust has fallen to the ground. It's those 3 years between 45 and 48. It's almost like they go back into the same place that was like a grave for all of their family, for all of those that they had known. Everything that they had known was buried. And in a way, the figure is making a choice. Do I get buried with those because he's carrying the mantle again over him? But in a sense, he's between either pushing up or going down within these years. And I thought to myself, the same words that Jesus speaks, into your hands I commend my spirit, again. So many survivors will say, it's like the dead, those that have perished are saying to us, we give our spirits into your hands and our memory into your hands. Don't forget us. And they hand it over. And in a sense, this is why the figure in the cloth is drooped over the back of the survivor, and the hands of the figure within the cloth are upward, pointed upward in a sense, giving themselves over to the one who survives, to remember him. As we step out of the larger room, we come into a room that's just a little bit off to the side, but in a sense, it represents, in my mind, the beginning of resurrection. But resurrection always has to go through such a death before it's realized. So what we do is we're looking at, within this piece that's called the butterfly, we're looking at a child on the inside of the crematorium. The child is curled up almost like in a fetal position. And it again represents that place of total abandonment, lost within himself, within this place. And when I'm talking to Jewish people, to Israelis that have come to see this, for them, this is the deepest place of the wound. This is the deepest place of the wound of the Holocaust, over 1.5 million Jewish children killed. But when you look at this, you see within this closed door of the crematorium, and what we've tried to do is the sense of, this is an exact copy of the crematorium doors from Birkenau, which is just up the road. And in a sense, what you're looking at is the hand of the child that you don't see on this side is now pushing through the closed door. And the hand of the child is clutching a very small piece of ground, a little piece of geography. This little piece of ground represents Israel, the land. And in a way, what you're also seeing on this side is a butterfly. You're seeing a butterfly that is about to take flight, because the piece itself was created, again, out of a poem that was written by a little Jewish boy in a ghetto called Theresienstadt. The name of the poem, what he named this poem, was called I Never Saw Another Butterfly. And in a way, what I wanted to be able to show, again, as the individual child, representing, in a way, the 1.5 million that perished, is his last words, which was this poem. His hand is holding this piece of ground. Over the surface of the ground are olive leaves, because I wanted to connect to the sense of olive oil from an Old Testament point of view was always used, the oil was used for anointing of kings and for healing. And I looked at it and I thought, this is the deepest place of hope attached to the deepest place of suffering, which is the promises of God the Father towards the Jewish people that they would return to their own land and possess it. This is why you look behind this piece and you see a collage of historical photography that represents Israel being born again as a nation, after 2,000 years of exile. All of this, all of the elements of the struggle, of what they went through after the Holocaust, 3 years, the War of Independence, all of these things that now has brought them back to the land. And in a way, it's a celebration, but it's under so much pressure again to survive, now being attacked. But what I wanted was, in a sense, all of this is a gigantic picture, but what's laid on top, and the thing that is the most dominant, again in Hebrew, is the actual poem that was written by the child. The name of the child was Pavel Friedman. He wrote the poem, I Never Saw Another Butterfly, in 1942. And in 1944, Pavel Friedman was then killed in Auschwitz-Birkenau. And what would have been, in a sense, the same child within the crematorium. And in a way, these words that he wrote within the ghetto, only a short time before he was killed, become his last words. The last words that he has left now behind him, in a sense, in a place of memory. We step away now from the butterfly piece. The butterfly piece for me is the beginning of resurrection, the return of the Jewish people to the land. So in a sense, it's the physical resurrection. You step into the final room, the final part of the whole journey, and you look at the piece here, and it's called the empty cup. We started in Gethsemane with a cup of suffering full to the brim, and now we've walked through this journey, this dialogue between these two personalities, and in a sense within this it becomes the prophetic piece. This is the piece that has not happened yet. The idea of the possessing of the land, yes, that has happened. But now the sense of what you're looking at are the two parts to the dialogue. And in a way, both of them are coming out of the stones that represent the memory of all of those that perished, all of those that suffered, and the two are coming out of the stones together, and in a way they're coming into a place of embrace, where the figure representing the Holocaust in a way is resting his head on the chest of Jesus, but in a way the hand, the wounded hand of Jesus, is also now pressing his head to his chest. And I look at it, the cup is raised above both of them, the cup that is now empty, and in a way it symbolizes the end of all suffering. And the final resurrection is a resurrection of relationship. Thank you.